Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage, on a blustery Sunday. Still above freezing, middle of January here in the state of Maine. That's a win. A very light winter so far. Now tonight they're forecasting some snow. Who knows? I'll let you know tomorrow night. I got up early today, all charged up. I was going to come out and weld this cross member. And after last night's video, I got a few excellent suggestions asking to maybe cover the tools that I use a little more. I kind of gloss over that, so not on purpose, but I think that'll be fun actually. So while this looks pretty simple, there is, a few minutes of layout because you want everything square and you want these to be aligned within reason. You don't want it to look crooked to the naked eye. So I have a few ways to do that. I'm looking around for a piece of tubing right here. I hope you can see this. This is nothing but scrap metal, and it doesn't even add up to exactly half of the tubing. It'd be nice if it actually hit it, perfect, but it doesn't, and of course there would be some error with my pen. So it's just two pieces of scrap metal, a couple feet long. But if I take and scribe it, flip it over, scribe it again, it shows me where the middle is. If you want to spread that out a little bit, you can. And either way, it's going to show you the middle, so if that makes any sense. So if I did it just once, that will give me a line for like when I'm notching, so I notch both ends the same on the same plane. But if I actually want to make sure I'm in the middle of the tubing, but this is really close to being on center. I should actually measure it, but again, there's gonna be some error, so I usually scribe it twice and split the difference. You can probably see where I did exactly that on the cross member on both sides. And then it was easy to measure between the holes. And in this case, the ground clamp for my welder would actually hold it straight, and it would sit on the bench just like this. Probably hit myself in the face. And then it was easy enough to level it both ways because it's a really nice fit, the tubing into the bracket. A machine fit almost. So I lined up the dot in between my marks, tacked it up, both sides, tried it in the car, and then slowly worked my way around welding it. To cut the tubing, I believe I showed this a while back, but I am completely in love with this Milwaukee Fuel metal cutting skill saw. It is the craziest thing how easy it cuts it. I have a vise down there that's in a big truck wheel, a 24/5 truck wheel that I bought at some guy's house a few towns over for 70 bucks. I love the thing. I had to repair the jaws and the vise, but it's been a solid unit ever since. And despite being huge in that big wheel, it rolls around because it's round, so I can move it anywhere I want to go, or I can use a two-wheeler to move it. So my buddy had showed me his. I think I told you the story. I went up to get a length of tubing. We were going to cut it in half so I could put it in my Dodge pickup. So in the two 11-foot pieces-ish, so I grab one end and I'm walking toward the bandsaw. He says, no, right here. And he grabs this and whacks it off completely straight because he'd been using his for a while. It takes a little bit to figure out how to cut straight with it. But in most cases, race car stuff, I'm going to be notching or squaring the end up anyway, so if it's not exactly straight, it's not the end of the world. The problem with using a bandsaw with chrome moly is that I've yet to find a bandsaw blade that really can take the beating that chrome moly is going to give it, so I always cut it on my abrasive chop saw, but then you got sparks and smoke, and while it's an efficient way to do it, and I can be really accurate with it because I've cut about 4 miles of tubing with my abrasive chop saw. I don't like it. Like I say, it makes a big mess. I have a piece of metal plate that I lean on the garage door and I shoot the sparks at that. And I always hang around afterwards, making sure I didn't catch the garage on fire. Where this doesn't even throw any sparks, I'm still using the original blade that came with it, 30 tooth for ferrous metals. And I bought a couple other blades to try, but so far I've probably cut 25 times, 25 pieces of tubing, and no problems yet. And that was on the first battery, and it wasn't even one of my new 5 amp hour batteries, so that's pretty awesome. No tool list would be complete without my cordless Milwaukee grinder, the original one I've had for 5-6 years now. I don't know why it's still going. It has many, many hours on it. And I did recently buy a spare that I have a death wheel in. Now, I'm probably a rare individual these days. I often, I should say seldom, use a death wheel. First time I ever used one, I was cutting the inner structure out of a Nova that I was going to put a tube chassis under up in the old garage. And I was doing it with an air-powered whiz wheel, and that's just a weak way to do it. The air-powered units are good for short cuts, but if you got to cut out all the sheet metal inside a car, you'll be there forever. So just out of desperation, I had a 4.5 inch abrasive disc, put it in my corded grinder, and I was introduced to the beauty of the death wheel, but it's not something I reach for. You see all the fabricators on TV, that's the first and only thing they really reach for. So I always use another method. So I have actually dedicated the other grinder that I bought to replace this when it fails, and maybe I'll learn to use it more. All the chromoly tubing has this blackish mill scale on it. I've cleaned this one a few times, but for the ends where I'm going to weld, I'm not going to be welding anything in the middle, so I didn't buff the whole tube. If I was smart, I would have, before I even started bending it in the bender, I would have taken my 3-foot piece of tubing and put it in the lathe and polished either end of it, flip it around, do one end, do the other. So instead, good old sandpaper, shine up the ends, and then Scotch-Brite after that, and then cleaned it with acetone and an old sock. Every video is complete with an old sock somewhere if you watch for it. And these plates I shined up with my abrasive wheel, and I put a brand new one on it to bring in debris, what's the word I'm looking for? Dirt, yeah, drawing a blank. Give me a second. I got a new wheel, so I don't want to bring over, dirt from a different job. So as far as actually welding it, it welded beautifully. Now, this is 083 tubing, and this flange, I believe, it's 187, so it's at 3/16. So to weld thick to thin, or thin to thick, you have to concentrate your heat on the thick piece. So it's pretty easy to do from this position. I could just make the puddle on the bracket and then just keep lifting it up onto the tubing. I didn't want to overheat the tubing, and my heat affected zone is decent. There's no way to prevent this from discoloring, but I can see my penetration is good. It's rare you get to actually see inside it. This is my center line of my chassis, so I know which way it fits in. Now, I'm probably the wrong guy to give welding advice. However, I am very comfortable with steel. And it's funny, the day I was talking to the man that built the car up until this point, he was talking about his style of TIG welding, and I was thinking to myself that ours are basically the same. Now, a lot of people like to pulse the pedal. They like to make a molten puddle, add some filler, let off the pedal, move over, repeat. And I don't do that. I like to get the puddle going, and my only definition I get, my dimes are really close together because I'm just moving, dabbing, because I don't want to hang out all day and create a lot of heat. I guess if I was backing off the pedal, that would decrease the heat, and as far as amperage goes, you know, it's 1/1000th for each thousandths of thickness, 1 amp for each thousandths of thickness. So 083, you'd be in the 85 or 90 range. However, this is a lot thicker. So I welded this at 115, and I didn't have to wait long to get a molten puddle. Again, I don't want to cook the tubing because it'll, you know, they claim chromoly will get brittle if you overheat it. So that's always a concern. So you want to get in there, get the job done, and move out, and it'll, when I'm going 083 tubing to 083 tubing, it'll go faster because it's thinner, obviously, even though I'll turn the amperage down. So again, I'm not the greatest of TIG welders, and I'm really comfortable on the bench. I'm going to really dislike, but it's a discipline you have to learn. When I actually move down, which you can see I have moved the welder down south here, so all I can say for doing it in the car is make yourself comfortable and just concentrate on whatever range you can do, and then reset. You know, the guys that do it all the time can probably go most of the way around the piece of tubing, or, you know, they're probably squeezing the pedal with their knees or with their butt cheeks, who knows, but I'm not at that point yet, so I'll just make myself as comfortable as possible. And just like I do on the bench, I go, you know, see how much range I got, and I'll go, if I gotta go only weld an inch, then I'm only welding an inch. So, and of course, you skip around, you don't wanna go around the whole thing. You know, standard stuff. You don't wanna get too much heat in one area. We are mocked up and tacked in. I do not use my final assembly hardware that came with the brackets. I always dig up some, you know, hardware store grade 5 stuff, so it came with lock nuts, so I don't want to spoil them. So now I can remove the cross member and the transmission and everything that's going to be in my way, and I'll weld as much as I can, and I'm going to be taking the floors out, so that might make it easier, but that's the goal when welding on the car, whatever is easier. Looking ahead at the next project, excuse the rusty crossmember here. This was one of the Lenco transmission slides. Currently it's got my safety block of wood in case the floor jack failed overnight to hold the transmission up. So that is in the way of the X that needs to be on the lower frame rails. And that's also my fake cardboard drive shaft. So it's a mess under here, but I'll straighten it out in a minute. But there needs to be an X in the middle, and the criteria for the X is it has to be as long as it is wide. So as wide as the frame rails are, it needs to be as long. So it will go up past where this cross member is, about where that mark on the frame is right there. And we'll go back over here, so. And it has to, you know, be out of the way, and that will become, probably incorporate my transmission mount and my drive shaft enclosure mount. Will probably mount to the X in some fashion, so. Half my afternoon was spent uncovering this bench, because if I was going to move the TIG welder down in this bay or between the bays so I could actually weld on the car, I still need a place to work on the small pieces. So I had dragged this bench in many years ago. I probably cleaned it, but I never obviously refinished it. There's several others that I've taken the time to paint and everything, but this was just another horizontal storage device, so I've yet to clean out underneath. It's not too bad, but the top, I spent the time at least moving the stuff off the bench, and I used my new Milwaukee M18 cordless sander with the dust collector, and I sanded the whole thing, and then I took my flap wheel and actually, you know, ground up a spot and a spot for the ground, so I can actually, you know, put my ground clamp here and actually weld on top of the bench. My ground clamp, and I'm going to extend it on this Lincoln Precision TIG 275, where it's a 275 amp machine. The ground clamp is a Gorilla, it will take pieces and rip them right off the bench if the cord starts to fall. It's really high quality cord, but where the welder currently lives, and it's going to live there for a while, it grounds to the car no problem, and I got enough lead, I think, so I guess this is going to be the setup. It had to happen. I was dreading it because, you know, I'm still, amongst everything else, I just stopped cleaning for a while, and I'll work on, you know, something. This is something I've been wanting to start on, so if I just keep picking away one tube at a time, and when I finish the X under the car, I'm pretty much done underneath, and then it's time to move upstairs. I need to move all the tin work out, which is, it's all Zeus fastened in, and then the reason why I bought the bender is to make the funny car cage enclosure and finish up the chassis up there, but there's really not that much to do, so things are rolling along pretty good. I do need to put the second half of the X in the roof. That's part of the spec. You don't need it on 25.1 SFI, but on 25.2 and 3, where the car's heavier, you need a full X in the roof. So that's one of the big differences. And I was looking at the half the X that's there. It has one tube in the ceiling already. And it's at least 1 1/8", which is good. It's over the spec. It might even be 1 1/4". So I'm going to match whatever's there. And if it's bigger than it needs to be, so be it. So when we get up in the car, there's a few other things I need to change that don't meet spec, or at least add on. In some cases, like the dash bar, the way it is currently positioned, it is not legal. I'm not going to cut the one out that's in there. I'm going to add one in the correct spot. Now, it's redundant, but that's okay. 4 or 5 feet of chromoly tubing, I'll actually weigh it to see what I'm adding to the total weight, but it has to be there, and the other one serves a purpose, the way the front struts are designed and the motor plate's designed. Well, we'll get into it, but it all is important to where it is, so be it. It's not going to ever be the lightest race car there ever was, but for 55 Chevy, it's going to be pretty light. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. We're just going to keep doing this. We'll detail, we'll talk about the tools and the procedures and keep moving forward. I'm having fun. Hope you are too.